Welcome to the fourth webinar for the Nordic Grand Solutions program, the call. I think most of you might have been in the call webinars before, know what the call is about. But just to reiterate, there is a free choice of approach. You can have a technology at the core of your project. You can have a service. You can have a novel methodology, a novel approach to solving the issues of the green transition. In any case, your solution should reach the national and regional targets in time with a strong and comprehensive solution that is not just a description of a specific solution, but also describes how that solution should be implemented and what that would require of the society in the Nordics to have this new thinking or new technology or new approach applied. How will you do that as part of the project? Because if it takes you 3 years to develop the solution, we are very close to 2030, and it's a little late at that point to start thinking about how should that be then applied. So I'm going to share my screen so that we can have a look at the PowerPoint for this meeting. Let's just wait for that to happen. I have to see what my screen looks like. Can everybody see the Nordic Grand Solutions Webinar? Because
Yes.
I can't see it.
Yes.
Thank you, everybody. Also, please interrupt. Don't be very polite and wait for me to recognize that you asked for a message to speak, permission to speak. Just jump in as we progress. If there's a lot of action and a lot of talking, you can also write your question in the chat. That would also work. And if you think I'm too late in calling on you for the chat, just say so. Is that clear for everybody?
Yes.
Thank you. So, first of all, the deadline is the 14th of September at 14, because that's easy to remember. So that's in a little bit more than a week's time. You should have plenty of time still to fill in the application at the Insights portal, provided that you have a consortium in place, more or less, and that you have your concept in place. Then the rest is answering questions. And if in doubt, keep the answers short. If you have to spend a lot of time explaining something with a lot of words, maybe it's not clear yet what it is you want to do, and you should try to make your text shorter. That's just the general advice. Keep in mind that if you have a very innovative approach, then we need to understand it before we go into the details of how is this good? Is this good science that you want to do? Is it a good method? First of all, we have to understand what it is you want to do. So that is your first order of business when you describe your project. So the portal Insight is Insights. There's maybe an S missing. We share this portal with Norforsk and Nordic Innovation, so don't be confused that it says Norforsk and that you get a reply from Norforsk emails, because this is a shared platform for application handling. When you log into this, somebody needs to mute their. There's a weird sound in the back for somebody. Thank you. For this link, you will find information details about the call, eligibility criteria, the expectations for timeline, and what you will be evaluated on. Eligibility criteria are really, really important because you will be out of the evaluation out of the competition for funding if you miss a criterion. There are some uploads you have to perform. Make sure you have them all. The submit button will accept your submission if there are still missing bits in the application, because sometimes a question doesn't make sense for a project and therefore they should be forced to fill out that question. But these uploads are mandatory, so you will not get the submit button unless you have filled out all the mandatory information in the uploads. There are some nice links. There's a Q&A page. If you can't find your question and answer, then the webinars might answer it, or you simply have to email me or my colleague Kevin Johnson. We will answer as soon as we can. The other webinars you can find in this link here. Our colleagues at Norfos just recently published a Nordic Added Value in Research Cooperation report that might help you to understand what is Nordic Added Value. But the short version is that we are looking for energy transition, green transition solutions that will be better implemented together and better developed together, and not just something that is a good idea to develop, but that you add the dimension in the way of how you want to solve it, where the solution is better for being solved together. You could develop a solution for one country, but it's a much better approach to do it together. And you simply explain in the application why this is a better solution, the better approach. We have a matchmaking.
And specifically,
yes?
What do you mean by together? Is that together as in the Nordic countries,
yes.
or together as different companies within one country?
Well, that the consortium represents the necessary partner types and skills and competences for this development of the approach, of the idea, concept, so the technology solution, but that it is both across more than a minimum of 3 countries or regions in the Nordics, and that it is also across a necessary value chain, and also maybe across types of participants, stakeholders, like maybe your solution requires citizens engagement, then you have that in your consortium somehow. Maybe it requires a host for a test, then that the host will be in the consortium. And then maybe you don't need to test it in 3 different countries, but then there is an assessment in the project that this will also work in the other countries because there is a Nordic added value, and the solution will be similar in other countries, so that the result can be applied after the project in the Nordics in general.
Yep.
If it's a product or a service, it's likely that the joint solution will mean that you will have a solution that can be applied in all of the Nordic countries, meaning that you have, 27, 28 million potential customers, rather than between 4 and 12 million customers. So it's a better market. That could be one Nordic added value, that this solution can be implemented for a similar market result. That is one Nordic added value that would be quite obvious. It could also be that everybody needs to develop this new set of rules or this new set of market rules or regulations, and why not just have the same from the beginning? Because then it's a lot easier for the companies to develop into this technology or into this approach or service. So you decide what it is you do, and then you figure out how is that good for the Nordics that we do it together, and explain it. And don't be afraid to be obvious. Sometimes it is obvious, but you just have to put it in the application text that obviously this is Nordic added value because it's good for us that all of us are part of this new development together, so we don't waste time.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Oh, I just skipped a little bit fast, but let's see if I can go back. Yeah, we have a matchmaking form. Use it if you are still looking for a partner. Both ways. Maybe somebody's offering a partnership, and maybe somebody is looking for a project to join. Or you can ask for somebody. If you're missing a specific type of partner, you can go up here and hope to find them. If you are currently looking for a project to join or looking for a partner that you need, I will allow you at the end of the webinar to make a very short pitch what it is you're looking for. So we had a lot of questions, and they more or less come back to the same types of questions across the board for everybody. So I will address them. What's the difference between a work package description and a Teams description that you have to upload? The work package descriptions explain how the logic of the project. What is the stepwise approach to solve the issues of the science that you are going to perform? And what will be done? Who's involved in what? Who's in charge of what? How are there interdependencies between the tasks or the results of the deliverables? Are there constraints that unless this is done in the first 3 months, we can't proceed to the next step, and describe how that works? Or if you have designed your project in a way that there are no constraints, just make that clear. It would be great if you could also add very shortly what kind of resources are required for each task or each work package, and then with an appropriate level for your project. Like this will take, everybody is involved in this communication task, and that means that everybody will have one person month assigned for communications or something. Or this task is only for 2 partners, and they will work 10-person months each with a very dedicated effort, because this is a complicated task that they are specialized in. Just sort of estimate what you need for the different subparts of the project. However, if work packages and the standard approach is not useful for your proposal, you're welcome to have another planning outline, as long as we can follow what is it you want to do, and what steps are you going to take to solve your tasks, your research. It would be normal that there is a management work package, there's a communication work package, but those are just very standard. That most projects have them. You fill in how you want to do it. One requirement, one of the eligibility requirements, is that you have a 2%. You have a place in your project description where you show how you're going to cooperate with the other projects that are granted in this call. Because we might fund 2 projects that are doing the opposite of each other, and then they should be able to have a coordination with each other. Are we going out with a recommendation that is exactly the opposite of your recommendation? Then you should know, and we should know, because then there might be a recommendation that should be the outcome of that approach. It could also be that one project will use a resource that another project is also going to use, a land resource or a available energy resource. Then it would be interesting that they know that each other is working on the same approach, but from different viewpoints. In any case, all the projects are going to have to know what each other is doing, because there might be overlaps and interdependencies that will accelerate the value of your work if we compare notes as we progress. You have to be aware that you cannot work for 3, if you're granted a project here, you cannot work for 3 years and then come out with a result. There will be an interaction between the projects and between Nordic Energy Research and the projects. throughout the period. So you should have a planning for that. If you don't know how to put that into your budget, how do we assess dissemination, communication, cooperation with the other projects? Just make sure that you have a place for it in your application. And if you have no clue what that will cost, add a minimum of 2% of your overall budget, something that would be suitable.
May I ask?
Yes.
Did I understand correctly that we should plan in the project cooperation with other projects which will get funding, but we don't know yet which are those projects?
Exactly. So that can be a
But
little
we
bit.
should somehow write there something which indicates that we will do this.
Yes, it could be a task if that makes sense, that this is where we would put these hours and these efforts, so that there is somebody who will be responsible for that, or it could be part of another work package. It should be somewhere.
Okay.
And if you have no idea what that will cost, add a percentage of the total budget.
Thank you.
And just write, we estimate something. The other half of this upload is the team's descriptions. The team's descriptions should be more cross-cutting. It should describe what are the people in the partnership doing, who will be working together across companies, across, so that who will be, let's say that there are 5 tasks in the project. Who will work on the tasks? What kind of teams will they be? How will they draw on the different partners in the partnership? And what are their competencies? How are they being put into play to solve this project? It would be great that we can see that there's a complementarity, that all partners have critical roles and bring critical skills. Who are the core team members that you will bring to this project? You don't know necessarily the names of all the people in your project, but you know the core team. And it would be great to know that what are they doing here? What are they bringing to the project? Again, a distribution of effort so that we see if there is a very lean effort, so that some people are maybe only in a few tasks, or if there is a much broader cooperation that everybody are in every task. That will, you choose how you want to do it, but it should reflect well how your approach is in your project. So it would be that we want to read that the teams are cooperation teams across partners in the project, and we want to see that people are put to good use for the project. We also would like to see how decisions are made. Is there a task leader or a work package leader who with the team decides, is this good, or are we done with this task, or is this the deliverable we're going to create? Is this the result we will go out with? Or if there is a disagreement, how will you solve it? That is one way to use a team to describe that. I have a couple of questions in the chat. Is the specific format needed for the CVs and the letter of commitment? A short CV with the highlights that are relevant for the project would be great. It doesn't have to give every single on your long CV. If you're a researcher, is something we can look up if we need to understand if the short CV opens up some questions for the expert who reviews your application. They can check you online. It should be what is necessary to understand your role in this project. That should be in your CV. The letters of commitment are only 1 page unless it's an electronic sign, because then electronically signed letters always generate 2 pages for some reason. If it's a PDF, it can be 1 page. Signed PDF. Is it necessary to specify the number of hours by money, or in the letter of commitment, or just indicate 10% in kind of support? If the in-kind is hours and it's a partner, then it will also be in the budget. How much are you going to commit of resources? How much are you asking for funding? And how much will be own funding? If it's an observer partner, and they are doing something that it will count as in-kind support, then the letter of commitment should describe what kind of in-kind support it is. Is it access to a resource or a test facility? Then that has maybe a value. If they don't want to explain the value, because maybe that's a competitive figure or commercial cost that they don't want to explain, then just give an estimated minimum value. If it's hours, if it's expertise, if it's an advisory board function, minimum number of hours and an estimated value of that expertise that we would then judge if that sounds reasonable. Upper limit for overhead costs. Technically, no, there is no upper limit. You have to justify the limit if it seems unusual or unreasonable. That should definitely be a good justification. Most of the universities and technological institutes have a national rule for overhead. The Danish universities at least have a 44% flat rate overhead that they should apply, because this is the standard for the Danish universities. Whatever the standard is for your type of university or research organization, you should use that. If you are not a research partner, you should use a reasonable overhead that will allow you to participate in the project so that it can actually be performed. And if, in any case, it's probably a good idea to justify it in a short sentence per partner. Budget distribution. The answer is there should be a balance in budget, time, efforts, decision making, leadership, and a balanced distribution of all these factors doesn't mean that it has to be the perfect balance between the partners. It can be all evenly balanced as long as it's not heavily sided that one partner has 90% of everything and the others share the last 10%. That's not balanced. One partner can have 60% if there's a good reason for it. Maybe there's a costly test or equipment. And then you just write in the justification that this is balanced because that is how the project is designed. But try to achieve a balance in decision making, leadership, not by Nordic country, but by partners. It's not necessary to have a balance between the country representation, as long as each partner is there for a good reason. To have the third country as a small communications consultancy service from one country just to bring in the third partner, that's a little unbalanced. That there would probably be better partners to choose from a third country than a small role. But again, you justify your decisions. And if you think something looks unbalanced, you explain why this is reasonable for your project. And the in-kind contribution, I will get back to that. One good question is, can people participate from other regions? Yes, they can. They will also count towards the in-kind. What kind of hourly rate can such a partner count? These are numbers, 1,000 Norwegian kroner for an hour. The rate for an engineer would not be unreasonable. For an executive decision maker, a CEO, maybe it's a higher number. But real hourly rates will work too. Give an estimate of this value, because they will not be able, if they are from outside the Nordic, they will not be eligible for funding. So all of it will count towards the in-kind. And that it has to just be reasonable and well argued. And how do they then report this type of in-kind contribution? If you are a university, you will have an auditor already. What they accept, we accept. it is probably the easiest to follow the standard EU approach with a timesheet where you write whoever participated for what hours and did what, and then keep a list. This is also a recurring project question for this personnel and salaries spreadsheet. Do we have to give the precise wage of the persons of our partners? No, it doesn't have to be the exact monthly payment that that person receives. It can be a rounded off number. It has to be. You have to have this audited anyway during the project timeline. So if you write a too high a number, then and you get a grant, you will be actually paid too much for this effort, and that would be strange. So yes, you have to sort of be close to the actual hourly rate, but or the monthly salary, but it should include social costs, personnel costs, and indirect costs, which means that we cannot see precisely what that person earns anyway, and that should solve the problematic part of answering this question. Not everybody wants to show exactly what they earn. Really understand that. But if there is a partner that has a critical knowledge in their company that is very important for the work in the project, we probably need to know that person is named for their position and their skills, and we need to know that they are in the budget with the effort that they should have in the project. But it doesn't necessarily follow that you at this time you maybe don't already know who will be the research assistant, who will be the technical staff. You just write, if you don't know the names of the people yet, but it will be people who will have a role at a certain payment level. You write in the type of person you're looking for, and then in the role, project position, column A, and then you write in a name to be determined, and you write the estimated monthly cost for these people that you haven't decided yet who will it be. If you know it, you should write it. You should be as precise as possible, because that gives a better budget and a much more trustworthy budget. Can the project manager be assistant professor? No. The project manager must be a senior researcher in the field of the project, employed at the research performance organization, that is the project leading organization. So if you are brand new PhD, you probably, well, you will not have the CV to support your project management role. I might be wrong, but this might be a very novel research field that very few people have the CV to perform. Problem is, if you're very young and very new, you probably don't have project management experience, which you also need for this project. So it's not enough to have the science skill. You should also have some experience in managing a project and reaching your goals, keeping the project moving forward. So you have the CV of the project manager, it will be assessed for the necessary skills. Fredrik, you have a question? Fredrik Östlund.
Sorry,
Yes.
if you jump back to the previous slide, a question that we have from the industry partners is, I think it's mentioned in there, but if I understand correctly, for example, an unsigned Excel sheet of their hours, if they don't book it in another system, that is fine for you
Yes.
as a funding organization. Is that
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Thank
that you actually did the work. So then we assume probably that is true. Yeah.
Yeah. But we have a couple of industry partners that will contribute with their time, and they have raised this question. So.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's a question, project organization and implementation. I don't see what the question is. Jan, for a time, please ask your question again or tell. Yeah.
Hello, thanks. Yeah, the question was at the bottom there. I mean that what is for you the difference between the research strategy and the research implementation section there?
Yes.
Because often like research methods are included in a work package description, I would suppose, or I mean, you have decoupled them in a way, and I'm not sure how we should address that.
Right. I
Thanks.
think that this offers you the chance of saying that we have an approach or strategy that has this methodology and this merit. It is based on some well-established thinking or the references you have to think that this is a good idea to work on, and that how you're going to work on it, and that this is also a good idea, that this is a useful approach. But the research implementation can be more detailed. What is the link between what you do and how that is then, who's involved, and how will it meet the other requirements of the project? How is it performed? How are you going to make that play out, the playbook of the science that you're going to do? Does that make sense? There is a difference between the assessment of, is this good science? Is this a good way to approach the problem or to look for the solution? And then how is the practical play of that? Who will do what? How will this be? Who will be involved? How will you meet the right people to interact with? Where will you meet them? Are they in the project already, or will you have to go out and make a survey or do a test or find somebody, have a workshop? How will you get to the result? If you think that you're explaining the same thing twice, then maybe split it up or just explain it twice, but maybe with different words in case we understand it differently. But from a lot of projects, this will be two different things. Why is this good research, and how is this good science? What is it based on? And then to do this, to reach the impacts that we hope this project will lead to. What is the link between what we do and how the impact is reached? That's also a way to explain. Again, how the logic of the project will play out. That's the research implementation. Can we include a PhD student in the project? Well, you can. You're welcome. But a PhD study will not be finished inside the project timeline. And the budget beyond the project timeline will have to be guaranteed by the university or the industry partner, which is industrial PhD. And the cost for that extra time cannot count towards the in-kind requirement because it's beyond the project timeline. And also, whatever the PhD student is doing in the project will have to be reported in the project. It's not be reported in the thesis after the project is done. So yes, you can put a PhD student in. Maybe you already have a PhD student working on something. Then that PhD student will be fully paid for. That would be great for the project. Be aware that your auditor might not be happy if you count the money twice. But you're welcome. The in-kind contribution requirement is 10% of the funding sought. Meaning that if you ask for 10 million Norwegian kroner, then the in-kind must be 1 million Norwegian kroner. So that the total budget will be 11. Yeah. This is across the total budget of the total applied for budget. funding sort. So it doesn't have to be evenly distributed on each partner. Maybe one partner needs 100% cost coverage. Maybe somebody else will then carry their in-kind. If you're an industry partner, it is normally expected that they definitely carry some in-kind. It will be unusual if an industrial partner has no in-kind contribution. In any case, if it's not a flat rate 10% for everybody, write in the justification resources section how you did it or who's covering. There's a question from Amir. Go ahead, Amir.
Yeah. Regarding this 10% in kind and letter of commitment, as I understood, in the letter of commitment, we should just mention that, yeah, we need this total budget and this amount of in-kind contribution, but we don't need to specify distribution of this in-kind. For example, this amount for laboratory, this amount for hourly wage, this amount, or we should do that.
Well, if it's an if the in-kind is all supplied by one partner, if one partner's in-kind contribution is all supplied as access to a laboratory facility, you should explain that. And say that, well, we are going to use this many hours, test hours, or we're going to use some technical staff or some materials, and this is estimated for the value of X, and that will be our in-kind contribution. Then you just explain that.
Yeah, because there is a form that we should specify distribution of the in-kind, for example, which amount in lab, which amount in. I'm just wondering, we should be accurate in this phase, or we can, for example, in later phase, we can transfer between, for example, salary and equipment.
Let's say that in your budget where you write, this partner is having this total money effort, cost effort, and they will have an in-kind contribution which is 5% only, maybe, or 1.0. Then you should definitely write if that partner is supplying something of a different type of value and not just money in-kind money contribution, but it's a different type of contribution. Then you simply write that, and what is the in-kind contribution and how do you monetize that? How do you justify that this is the value of 200,000 Norwegian kroner or whatever it is?
Yeah.
And sometimes you might have to say, we are not going to say a value because it's a commercial information. We will not tell you. Well, great. You can give a minimum value that will count, but we will not tell you value will not count.
Yeah.
Yeah. Justification. Oh, there's a small spelling mistake, my bad. Be clear, be short if possible. These are the best explanations, that they're clear and they're short. This is how we did it. Okay, thank you. If you need a longer description, go ahead and give a longer description, but it's a lot easier if you have if it's easy to explain, it's also easy to understand how you reach the number. Try to do that. Again, sorry. The amount of effort and budget assigned for cooperation and dissemination with the other projects granted under this call. If you didn't specify it in clear text somewhere else in your application, definitely write it in the justification resources section that we put this effort in that task. And these partners will participate it as described in the teams or in the tasks or the work packages, wherever you described it, and the sum of resources is estimated to be 500,000 Norwegian kroner. I don't know. So then whatever it is you estimate it to be, you put it in clear text and in justification resources so that we are sure that you did meet this eligibility criteria, that it is in your proposal, that we can find it. Otherwise, we might have an issue with knowing if you are eligible or not, if it's unclear. There's a question. We have work packages that are not led by one team, but all teams contribute to most. Well, if you think that you have the option to describe your project in a works package description and also in the team descriptions, use them to describe your project, but try to keep one approach in one document and the other approach in the other document so it's easier to read. The team's document, we expect to read how the partners are going to cooperate. That will be understood from reading that document and who brings the skills for the work that you're going to do. That would we expect to find in that document. But again, make the format work for you, for your project. Just also remember that the experts have to read it and understand it. So do yourself a service and sort of be clear so that they can find what they look for. Auditing costs. The project leader must be an RPO. If you are a university, you have an annual state mandated audit process in place. So there's no reason to add extra audit costs for the project because we can just get that annual audit from your institute anyway. That would be fine. It will show that you use the money in the project correctly. If you are a different type of research performer who are not under state audit, you should add audit costs to your budget so that you will perform the audit when you ask for money or justify the money as spent in the project. Any questions for that? Okay. So what's the program about? It's a combination of new technology neutral calls. This is the call, meaning it doesn't have to be a technology. It can be a technology at the core of your project. It can be a service. It can be a market design. It can be a societal approach, behavioral change descriptions. It can be many things, whatever you think will work. But the projects that will be funded will cooperate. They will work on their own project, but there will be a meeting, a series of workshops where the projects will meet and other people can join and see how is this Grand Solutions progressing. Is there an early output that we can already uptake in our processes in the society around the projects? Therefore, we want to foster a co-creation atmosphere between the family of projects and the research teams, meaning that you cannot sit in a silo of research and then in 3 years' time there will be a result. There will be a more cross-cutting approach, and we should embrace that. That if you have an uncertainty, you have to make a decision: do we go this way or that way with our project? Because we have the option, and we see two different pathways going forward. And which one should we recommend? Then maybe have a workshop with some relevant other partners, other family project partners, and see if they're working on something similar. That could be an option. The reason for these open workshops and conferences as we progress in the 3 years of the projects is that we also want to build an interest in the Nordic audience, policymakers, industry decision makers, consumer organizations, whoever, planning departments of regions and cities. They need to be aware of what's coming, and we want them to know where to look for what is coming. What kind of recommendations could be in the near future to meet the green transition targets? So therefore, we can't wait 3 years to hear some considerations or recommendations, if there are any, as you progress. The discussion can inform you in your project, but it can also inform the society around you, or make somebody really want to hear your result. If it takes 3 years to get a solid result, somebody is really, really happy to hear it in 3 years because they know you will be coming, because they joined the workshops and the conferences. That's the idea. Any questions for that? Okay. So If one of you or several of you would like to make a very short pitch, what you're looking for, you're welcome. If you have any questions, you're also welcome. Yes, Amir? Go ahead.
Yeah, I have another question regarding salary calculation. We usually for budgeting and salary calculation, we have some annular salary increase. For example, for NFR projects that we have. For this call, for this type of call, we have just one number. This means that we should use an average value within the project period. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Great.
You're allowed to think that there is a development in monthly salaries in the FIA project. Yes.
Yeah.
Dagny, go ahead.
Hello. I would like to ask if I could make like an introduction.
Go ahead.
Okay. Okay. All right. I am gonna share my screen.
Okay.
Here we go. And put it to presentation mode. Okay, thank you. So my name is Dagný Hauksdóttir and I live in Iceland. And yeah, I have been researching ocean energy in the proximity of my home island of the south coast of Iceland. And I've also been collaborating with people who live at a different island, which is extremely rural and also has very limited energy options. So I would just like to shortly present these two cases. First, ocean energy in Iceland. Iceland is, of course, an island with very much access to oceans, which we are not currently utilizing for any energy generation. And we also often have, of course, cities and towns located very close to the oceans.
Excuse me, Dagny, you have maybe 1 minute or 2 minutes in total, so
okay.
you should be very short.
This is my home island, Vestmannaeyjar, which I have recently had some grants to investigate the opportunity of ocean-related energy. And I would be very interested to meet with people who are working with that field. The other case is the case of Grímsey, which you can see here on the right side. It's located in the north of Iceland, and it has no connection or infrastructure connection to the mainland. So they are primarily using fossil fuel energy, and it's a complicated case because there's a lot of bird species, so windmills are not an attractive option. Myself, I have a PhD, and you can contact me in this email address. Thank you.
Thank you, Dagny. Very nice and short. If anybody else would like to say you're missing somebody or you're offering something, you can go ahead. Any questions, you can also go ahead. But again, we have the matchmaking form. Mohammed, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question regarding the salary and salary of engineers working in the lab. So can we follow this Leiested model that we have in Norway for salaries, or?
What is that model you're thinking of?
So the cost of like instruments that we use in the lab.
Right.
So does it include all the engineers? Can we consider it like that? How much of lab we use, or it's not included?
If this is, are you from a university?
Yeah.
If this is how you would normally count, you do that, and then you write in your justification that you use this model.
Okay.
for other countries, it might be more normal to have the actual salary and then the materials cost, or the access to the laboratory at an hourly rate is calculated for some universities, and others use an overhead to cover the costs. So whatever model you use, you write in your justification, we use this approach to calculate the cost.
So cost of access to the lab we can include in general?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, great. And it will be in the equipment part, or?
I would
in the
think it
budget?
would make sense in the equipment part as a resource. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Because anyway, if you're going to do work in a laboratory, it would be nice to know that you have the laboratory to do the work in. Any other questions? I'm looking through the chat to see if I missed something. So in general, if you're going to use a resource that is not obviously available would be meeting rooms and university facilities. But maybe you're going to do a field study or implement something in a factory setting or in a farm was mentioned. That the owner of that land or farm or factory or the city council that you are going to do a survey with, whatever it is you're doing, they should probably be partners so that you actually have access to this resource and to the time of the relevant people or the physical place. If they say you can go ahead and use it as you like, we're happy. We don't want to be partners because we don't have the time for it, but we are happy to our idea is that you can have access. Then they are probably an observer, and they should write a letter of commitment to say, yes, we give you access, but we don't want to, we don't have the resources to participate inside the project. If you claim that you have access to something and then we can't see where that access comes from, it will be difficult to assess if you really have that access. If you're going to have a consumer interaction and it will be a survey, who will do the survey? See, that should be part of the description, maybe in a relevant team description, who knows? So the efforts that you do that are outside need an extra resource or depend on other people giving you their time or their thoughts. If you're going to have a workshop with some stakeholders, how are you going to reach those stakeholders and make them spend the time? That would be a good thing to describe. So that we understand that the project will actually have the resources they're looking for, that they need to perform the project. Travels, of course, it would be, it's a green transition call. You shouldn't travel with airplanes all the time just to meet every 2 weeks. You should try to be efficient with travels. But you shouldn't avoid a travel just to have a very low CO2 footprint in the project. Travels and meetings are necessary, especially to build new partnerships and to understand each other, that you work on the same basis, that you have a joint understanding of what it is you do in the project, especially if it's a new partnership. If it's a well-established partnership, then maybe you can have online meetings from the beginning and meet less physically. But make sure that there is a reasonable budget for to be convincing that you will actually perform this project together. And how you're going to meet this is a nice thing to describe. And that there is a suitable budget for it in terms of hours, if it's an online meeting or travels, costs for travels, if when that is necessary. Are there any questions for that? Great. It's nice and clear, I hope. Can you have a project of purely researchers? All of them are universities, every single partner. Yes, you can. Depending on what you want to do in the project, you decide who should be in the partnership, except that the manager, the research, the project leader must be an RPO. If you're wondering about the de minimis funding rule for non-researching partners, one of the other webinars answered that. There's also part of a question and answer in the Q&A section that de minimis covers. We have, I think, 4 more minutes if there are any more questions. Yes, project can have, one important part. If, let's say a project has 3 partners representing each a different country and is eligible for funding for this reason, and the project leader is an RPO, what happens if one of the partners is not eligible for funding? Let's say that the partner is deemed to be not, let's say is deemed to be not actually from that region, from that country. Maybe it's a subsidiary of a large European company with a small office that just opened, and it will not be counted as a true Nordic partner. Then the project has an issue. Can it continue to operate if one partner is not eligible to join within the eligibility criteria? And what is your fallback strategy in that case? You have to answer this question, and maybe your partnership is very big. You have 20 partners representing still 3 different regions. Then one partner might draw out of the proposal because they change their policy of what projects to be in, or the lead person from that project gets a new job and the company drops out of the project. Will the project be able to continue without a partner? Is there a critical partner that you cannot substitute with somebody else? You should mention it in your fallback strategy if you are on the edge of being critical to the country eligibility requirement. If you have many partners from many countries, you should put it in your risk assessment. What happens if a partner cannot fulfill their duties in the project? Because you're not in risk of not being eligible if you have many partners in many countries. But maybe you have other risks, and you should be have a look at your partnership and put that in your risk assessment. Is that one of the risks, and how will you deal with it? Is there a critical partner that you then have to substitute for somebody else? That's a good recommendation, that you have a look at your partnership and to see how will you deal with events like that. There is a gender dimension question you also should address. Try to do this well, because it is an eligibility. Well, it's not an eligibility criteria. If you fill it out, then you met the criteria to fill it out. But we have seen other applications where the ranking was to the benefit of the one with a better gender dimension description of how they intend to address this issue in the project time. And one did it not very well, and one did it really well, and then they were ranked higher. So do yourself the benefit of having a true look at your gender dimension in your project. And this can be balancing the partnership. It can be an approach to engaging stakeholders with gender dimension as part of that approach. It can be maybe you realize that this is a novel field that needs more students and more people to work in this field, and therefore you should have a gender dimension effort in making it interesting for a variety of genders to join this field of study, for instance. whatever fits your project, you reserve the service of having a good look at it and what would be relevant. The answer, no, it's not relevant for us because everybody uses electricity and that's what we generate. That's not a good answer for gender dimension. But we have seen that answer. Yeah. Any questions for that? Right. This is my contact information. My email is not there. Maybe I can fix that. Let's fix it here. There you go. A nice and simple email. I will also put it in the chat so that you might copy it. You can also write my colleague Kevin. Maybe Kevin, if you're still here, you can write your own email because I don't want to misspell it right now. Oh, you don't see my screen right now. Sure, that's true. Kevin, thank you. There we go. I just realized my email wasn't there, but the phone number is good enough. And all the relevant information can be found if you go to nordicenergy.org. You can follow the links and find the older webinars and the other PowerPoints, and this one will be available shortly, both the PowerPoint and the webinar and the video recording, and also the links to the Insights application portal and where the full call text and the requirements and the evaluation criteria are all written. If there are no more questions, I will stop the recording. If I only knew, there we go.